The word Waffenträger may cause you to shudder, remembering a tank capable of wiping out an entire flank in moments. And while the real German designs may not have reached that sheer level of absurdity, they make up some of the strangest designs of the Second World War. Throughout history, there have been countless tanks, all designed to kill. But not all have been a success. What happened to the ones that never made it, and why did they fail? My name is ConeOfArc. Join me as we journey through time, uncovering failed projects and forgotten creations in Cursed by Design. Before we get into the main topic of this video, I just want to give a special thanks to all of my YouTube members and everyone who has bought merch through my Teespring store. In order to make this series the best I can, I've needed to get a lot of source books, and since so many of the topics I feature are on seldom discussed vehicles, those books can be very rare and expensive, so your support is greatly appreciated. But let's get into the video. To say that vehicles that were considered Waffenträgers were outlandish is an understatement. And although most were barely even mocked up, they are a broad and diverse group of machines. They all share one thing in common, however. They were built not just to house a cannon, but also to be able to transport that gun to a location and have it be easily removed for use as a normal artillery piece or field gun. The first vehicle that was built in any number that bore the Waffenträger name is the Heuschrecke 10, or as its official designation refers to it, the 105mm Leichte Feldhaubitze 18-1 L28 auf Waffenträger Geschützenwagen 4B, but I'll refer to it by its English translation, the Grasshopper. Designed by Krupp, this tank, which was built in 1943, was based on the chassis of a Hummel, but unlike the SPG this was based off, it did not share the designation of a self-propelled artillery due to one feature. The turret on this tank was fitted with hydraulics, which would allow dismounting of the turret for use as a normal artillery piece, as I mentioned earlier. This program was cancelled, however, due to the fact that the production would disrupt the supply of panzers, which were deemed more important. One of the 3 prototypes still exists today and is on display at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, having been fully restored after being displayed outside at Aberdeen. The next design to be produced past wooden mock-ups would be a program by the name of Leichte Einheitswaffenträger, or Light Unit Weapon Carrier. For this design, it was decided that the previous use of a modified Panzer hull was too costly and heavy for the intended use, so in February of 1944, new specifications were given. As with the previous designs, the guns would be removable, although it would forego the complex hydraulic system for simplicity. Under these new requirements, 3 designs were presented: the Krupp-Steyr Waffenträger, the Rheinmetall-Borsig Waffenträger, and the Ardelt Waffenträger. All 3 mounted 8.8cm Pak-43 guns, giving them a tremendous amount of firepower, but they could also accept other guns. The Krupp-Steyr prototype was built using the running gear from a tracked tractor, whereas the Rheinmetall was built using 38T wheels. However, it was the more open design of the Ardelt that was accepted for production. This would not occur, however, due to the end of the war. One Ardelt Waffenträger remains today at Kubinka, having been used in the field in the east. Produced in parallel to the Leichte Waffenträger project was a design referred to as the Mittlerer Einheitswaffenträger. Intended to allow an even greater variety of potential armaments, these included the 10.5cm like the other designs, but also allowed for a 12.8cm or even a 15cm option. Again though, the end of the war and various issues with the design prevented any production past the prototype. Late in the research of this video, I ran across one other Waffenträger but could not track down much information on it. I still want to mention it, however, since it is a very bizarre creation. This monster is called the Vomag 88mm Flak 18 Waffenträger. As I mentioned, not much is known about the production history of this vehicle, but it's based on the Omnibus 7 civilian transport vehicle, and supposedly in early 1940, 21 to 24 vehicles were produced. So far, we've discussed the various designs that reached the prototype or limited production stage. However, there are many more designs that never reached that level of development. First, we'll take a look at some of the ones that were actually considered during the war, and then we'll take a look at some of the designs made up post-war and featured in games. Please keep in mind, many of these have very little known about the design without access to archives, which I don't have, so the information may not be completely accurate, but I will attempt to get as close as I can. We'll start with one that may be familiar to many of you, the Waffenträger Panzer IV. This tank is featured in World of Tanks, and is based on a potential design to use the Panzer IV as a basis for a gun platform. There were two variants planned, one with a 149mm howitzer, and the second with a 128 anti-tank gun. However, due to numerous factors including the high demand for Panzers and the fact that the Panzer IV was planned to be taken out of production, this vehicle never left the paper it was drawn on. The final group of vehicles we will discuss are the many proposed Waffenträger Panthers. And I want to give a shout out to the Tank Encyclopedia, who I've worked with on some videos in the past, for having a fantastic article about these, which I will link in the description as I'm going to be using it as my primary source for this. It seems strange that the Germans would even consider a Waffenträger variant for the Panther hull considering the cancellation of programs using the much cheaper Panzers, but nonetheless that's exactly what they did. And they didn't hold back in the slightest. The first of these designs was a tank drawn up by Krupp in 1942. This vehicle, known as the Krupp 1 or Grasshopper like one of the previous Waffenträgers, would have mounted either a 128mm or 150mm gun. However, no blueprints survive, meaning that what it looked like will forever be lost to history. Krupp didn't stop there, however, and made a second design named the Krupp 2, later nicknamed the Grilla or Cricket. It's not unreasonable to think that both these vehicles would have looked nearly identical, since the main difference between them were slightly different versions of the guns they were planned to carry. A full-scale wooden mock-up of this design was completed and presented to the German Artillery Command in January of 1943. The design must have shown promise as Krupp was ordered to build two prototypes of the Grasshopper design, but this was later reduced to just one prototype of the Cricket. Orders were later sent to MAN for the Panther components to construct it, but work was later cancelled when no progress was made by Krupp. Despite the order to stop on the Cricket project, Krupp still continued to work on designs using the Panther chassis. The next to be drawn up was the Selbstfahrerfette mit absetzbarer 15cm SFH-18. Two versions were proposed, one that used a lengthened hull with a rear-mounted removable turret which looked remarkably similar to the Steyr Waffenträger we mentioned before. The second design featured a centrally mounted turret and more closely resembled the original Grasshopper Waffenträger design. One wooden mock-up of the second version was completed, but that was where they reached their end. Krupp wasn't the only company involved in this design competition though. Rheinmetall Borsig also tossed their hat into the ring. They produced several designs, the first being the 12.8cm K43 Selbstfahrerfette Rheinmetall Borsig, and the second being the 15cm SFH-43 Selbstfahrerfette Rheinmetall Borsig. As you may be able to tell by the name, the tanks were all but identical, only being armed with different cannons. Neither design interested the inspectors, however, and the Krupp design was viewed more favorably. This didn't discourage Rheinmetall though, and they submitted 3 more designs, although once again the only real change was the armaments the machines contained. One variant that would have been armed with a 12.8cm was mocked up in wood, but again, nothing further was done. Some of the more astute of you may have already recognized the muzzle brake of this machine. This design was given the cover name Scorpion. Not one to put down their pencils, Rheinmetall continued to produce design variations of this machine, including the one that would be extremely familiar to all you World of Tanks players, the 12.8cm Scorpion mit Panther Battalion, which was also drawn with a 15cm cannon. But all that work would come to be in vain, since in October of 1943 the project was cancelled. Still, Rheinmetall would not stop and created several more designs, although they inevitably did not pursue these projects or participate in the next Waffenträger Panther design competition, meaning the only ones left were Krupp, who were the original players in the Waffenträger type of vehicles and would inevitably be the last. This tank was called the Mittlerer Waffenträger SFH-18 Auf Panther. As before, this tank was to mount a 15cm gun, however this time it would have the muzzle brake removed to allow firing of sabot rounds. With the removal of the muzzle brake, this cannon would produce an incredible 28 metric tons of recoil. Other than the armament, not much is known about this project, although if you are interested in the potential design of the mechanism to dismount the gun, you can check out the source in the description. In the end, this program was ordered halted like the others, and although Krupp tried continuing to design a vehicle for production until nearly the end of the war, none ever left the paper they were put on. Last but certainly not least, I can't make a video about Waffenträgers without mentioning the tank that made the name known. And although it was never even designed during the war, it possibly caused more fear and dread than any other design I've mentioned. This legendary machine is Wargaming's Waffenträger Auf E100. A true monster featuring 2 different choices of main armament, both auto-loaded and capable of tearing apart anything it faced in seconds. Although, fittingly, even the fake Waffenträger on this list reached its end much the same and was replaced by the Grille 15. And with that, the story of the Waffenträger comes to an end. What started as a potential way to carry heavy weapons into the battlefield in a relatively cost-effective manner only succeeded in contributing to Germany's large list of prototype designs which took workers and resources away from more successful designs. It's very unlikely any of these designs could have made any impact on the war without production on a mass scale. Although with that being said, Germany had seen great success throughout much of the war with their vehicles like the Stug, so one could surmise that had these vehicles been introduced into a similar role with bigger, more deadly cannons, they could have posed a serious threat to any armored force attacking them. That is something we will never know, however, because history is already written. As always, I hope you all enjoyed this video. Please leave a like if you did, and subscribe for more episodes of Cursed by Design. If you want to help this series to continue to grow, I also encourage you to share the video with your friends, and consider supporting the channel by becoming a YouTube member or by checking out my merch store. This helps me purchase necessary source material to ensure accurate and detailed information for these videos. Hopefully I'll see you in the next one.